Good morning, folks, and welcome to Power Negotiating. Today's session is going to be on intense listening skills. And you're going to say, Reed, what are intense listening skills? Because I listen all the time. Actually, you probably don't. Most people do two things. They're either waiting until someone finishes speaking so they can go ahead and say what they want to say. They don't listen to what someone else is saying and then respond to them. What I want you to start doing is listening very intently to what someone else is saying. And as you start doing that, let's go ahead and talk about a concept I really want to bore in on. Most people like people that are like themselves. And you're going to like someone that's just like you. Now, we can't physically transform ourselves to be the seller. We're not going to be the same age, not going to be the same size, not going to be the same race, not going to be the same background. We're not going to have, if we do have any of those things, that's great, but we're not going to be able to physically transform ourselves to be a clone of them. However, what we can do is we can mirror them in as many ways as possible, which means that if they are leaning back and they have their hands behind their head, I want you to lean back and put your hands behind your head. If they're leaning forward and they have their hand on their knee, I want you to lean forward and put your hand on your knee. Not immediately. I don't want you to do this monkey see, monkey do. Maybe just gradually ease into it and lean forward. If they're speaking fast, I want you to increase your tone of speech until you're at the same pace that they are. If they're speaking slowly, I want you to speak slower. Everything that you do, I want you to do it deliberately and articulate exactly what you're going to say so that you sound educated. Don't overdo it, but people will respond positively to someone that appears that they have a solution to the problem. If you come in and you have a baseball cap on sideways and you have a t-shirt that's not tucked in, you're wearing jeans and you're showing some of your underwear, probably they're not going to respect you. Even if they're wearing the exact same outfit, they want someone that is going to be a problem solver rather than a problem. So as we're talking to people, we want to mirror them as much as we possibly can. Now, when we're doing that in speaking, one of the ways that we're going to do that is by listening very intently for our criteria words. And you say, Reed, what is a criteria word? A criteria word is a word that they use that is unique to them. So it might be something like, they might say dude, or they might say grody, or they might say cool, they might say groovy. If they say a word that's not in the normal course of conversation that someone would use, that is one of their criteria words. And you want to be very, very intent on listening to what they're saying. And if you want to really get to have them approach you and have them relate to you, use that criteria word, a word that they use uniquely, in the same context, in the same way that they would use it in your conversation back to them. Let me give you an example. They say, wow, today was a really cool day. And as you're talking to them, you notice they say cool 3 or 4 more times. And you say, wow, this would be a really cool deal. And what you're looking for is a response. You're going to see a physiological response. Either their eyes are going to get a little bit wider, their eyes might dilate, they might lean forward a little bit, their cheeks might become flushed, they might start nodding. And when they do that, what has happened is they have had a connection to you. And most people have a self-defense barrier, a psychological edge that they go ahead and put up so that you can't reach into their soul. And if you relate to them on this level, if you start using their criteria words, what you're going to have is when you see a physiological response, they've lowered their barriers and they accept you. And you have about 10 to 15 seconds where you can say a statement or you can say a word and they're going to accept it without filter. Now you have to be very careful when you're doing this that you do it in the correct manner and that you don't manipulate or take advantage of somebody else. But here's a question I want you to always ask yourself. Am I doing this to help someone? What is their dreadful alternative if I don't help? If they're going to be in worse straits if I don't help them, anything I do to help them is going to be an advantage. So you have to know that going in. And then when you use these criteria words, you're going to find that people are going to relate to you a lot better. After you start having them relate to you a little bit better, I want you to start asking them questions that they already know the answer to. And your goal is to design very good questions so that they will understand. You can impart information through your questions. Let me give you an example. If foreclosure is coming up in 2 weeks, would that help or would that hurt your credit? Well, the answer obviously is it would hurt their credit. But let them say it. Anything that I say might be a lie. Anything that they say is the truth, at least according to them. So if your credit would be hurt by having foreclosure, would it be a good idea to try to avoid having that foreclosure? You're going to say, duh, that's an obvious question. They're going to say, well, yeah, that'd be obvious. So what are your chances, or what is your action plan for avoiding that foreclosure? And here's where you stop and let them say something. If they don't have an action plan, so you'd really like to save your credit and you'd like to avoid foreclosure, if there was a way I could possibly do that, would that be of interest to you? Well, yeah, that would. What you've just done is you're having them tell you that you're the problem solver. If I go into them and I can say, I can do this, 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 and this, they're not going to believe you. If they tell you that you can solve their problems, it'll be much easier for them to accept that. Let's talk about objection handling. One of the easiest ways to handle objections is to do what I call the backtrack conditional close. Whenever somebody says something to you, your first response is going to be no. It's a processorial objection. I'd like to buy your house for X amount of dollars. No way, that's too low. They didn't think it through. So whenever someone objects to anything that you say, that might not be a rational objection. It might be something they say just as a response. One of the ways you can get around that is to do a backtrack conditional close. So if they say the price is too low, you say, so, pause, the price is too low, pause, assuming we can deal with that, are there any other objections? So the way we structure that is we say, so, pause, and then you repeat exactly what they say, word for word. If you paraphrase it, you've lost the magic. The price is too low, pause. Assuming that we can deal with that, are there any other questions? What you've just done is you've had them hear what they just said in their own words. And if it's a nonsense response, if it didn't make sense, probably they're going to say to themselves, oops, nah, I really don't want to do that. And they'll drop it. So when you say, are there any other objections? And they say no, great, let's go ahead and fill out the rest of this paperwork. You can object, they can object, but if you go ahead and ask them what their objections are and say, so assuming we can deal with that, and we're not going to deal with that, we're just going to have it hanging out there. Assuming we can deal with that, are there any other objections? What will happen is, a lot of times they'll just say, nope, okay, let's go ahead and go forward to make this happen. In our next session, what we'll be doing is we'll be dealing with credibility and ways to build credibility. Thank you.